Uh-oh, here we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Caroline Leavitt. I was just a little nervous about whether this was going to go live, but now it seems as though it is. So I'm the co-founder of A Mighty Blaze, along with Jenna Blum, which was started at the beginning of the pandemic to help bookstores whose doors were shuttered and to help authors like myself whose tours were canceled and to connect readers with writers. So we have a really special guest today, but a few housekeeping things first, which is that if you want to order any books, especially the book from our author, Kristi Vukovich, today, we've made it really easy for you and put up a link. So all you have to do is click on that. If you have any questions for Kristin, just pop them in the chat. If you want to subscribe to Mighty Plays, you can do that. So look at this gorgeous book cover. I absolutely love this. This is the Cheesemaker's daughter. We've got sheep, we've got green, Kristin matches it. This is one of my favorite books of all time. I read this book in manuscript and I just absolutely fell in love with it. And so I, of course, because I love it so much, I had to know Kristin, which I do, and I love her as much as I love her book. The book has been doing phenomenally. It got on Women's Day Book Club. It got a rave from Associated Press. Let me just read it. I have it up here for you. Let's see. Okay. Kristin's debut novel is a mouth-watering platter of culture, history, and the everlasting struggle for balance between tradition and progress. She employs beautiful, all-encompassing sensory descriptions, from the smell of the herbs to the squawk of seagulls. To the sheets Marina, the protagonist, had since she could remember. The rich details build an enticing world. As part of the mission of Regalo Press, which is the publisher, a donation is being made to the Croatian Scholarship Fund, as chosen by Kristin. So Kristin, here's some more stuff. A magical debut by Jessica Keener says. Captivating, says Today's Show author Jean Kwok. Deeply researched and fully inhabited, a thrilling, transformative read, Julia Phillips. Okay, so Kristin has written for New York Times, BBC Travel, Travel and Leisure, The Daily Beast, and more. An excerpt of her novel was longlisted for the Cosmonauts Avenue Inaugural Fiction Prize. She was named a 40 under 40 honoree by the National Federation of Croatian Americans Cultural Foundation, and she received a Golden Pen Award for her writing about Croatia. Best of all, Kristin has become a beloved friend, which makes this more fun than ever. So just a little bit more, and then you can come on. The Cheesemaker's Daughter is about a young woman, Marina, a refugee from former Yugoslavia, now Croatia, now living in America, fleeing a troubled marriage to go back to her native Croatian island to help her father with his struggling cheese factory. But it's really about so much more. It's about family and love and what we owe our parents and what we owe our countries and who we are meant to be. And of course, it's about my favorite thing in the world, which is cheese. So welcome, Kristin. Thank you so much for being on The Blaze.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. That was so lovely.
My mouth isn't working quite well. So anyway, we're thrilled to have you here. I'm thrilled to have you talking about this book. So let's get right to it. And anybody, if you have questions, pop them in the chat. So I always want to know, what was obsessing you at the time that you wrote this book? What were the seeds that just sprang this book?
So this has been a book that has been a long time in the making, because the initial seed was kind of planted back in 2011. So I have, as you mentioned, publications I've written for in a travel writing capacity. And I was actually writing for the now defunct Croatian Chronicle. It was a newspaper, and they sent me to this island, Pag, to report on a cheese festival in 2011. So I became obsessed with that island after the night ended with us, by the way, dancing on tables and everything. It was like, I was like, this is really fun. Like, cheese people are amazing. And this is like, I mean, I really was not well versed in the world of cheese. And so this island is very unique among Croatian islands. There's more than 1,000 Croatian islands. And I traveled around quite a bit. by that point, and my heritage is Croatian. So I've always kind of been obsessed going back, researching our family history and sort of like seeing the place where my grandparents are from. And this island just really captivated me. I learned it was divided by a king between two bishops centuries ago, and it just had all of this crazy stuff, and it looks like this moonscape. It's very unique terrain, and it just sort of like started the creative gears turning in my mind as a setting for a place. So I became obsessed with the island and the cheese pretty quickly.
It's incredible. It's incredible. I know, like, we had talked a little bit at Little City Books about the whole process of cheese making. And you had said that you didn't exactly make cheese, but you got to mush the curds a little bit. Tell us, like, I'm sure there's a big difference between the cheese we all buy in the supermarket and handmade cheese. Tell us about the process. Like, what influences a process like that? If somebody's I know sometimes they say when you're cooking, your emotions can get into the food.
Yeah.
So you want to be in a good mood. So tell us what you know and what you learned in your research about making cheese.
Well, it's really interesting. I feel like cheese making is kind of like the creative process of writing, really, in a way that kind of like, you have certain tools, you kind of like have an idea sometimes of where you're going. Sometimes, you have a certain idea maybe of what you're going to make, and then it might turn out, a different way, because I think that there's this sort of alchemy, especially when you're dealing with a natural product, and the same is true for wine. You're dependent on Mother Nature to a large extent, right? So
right.
For this particular island, they have an endemic breed of sheep. There are 35,000 sheep and around 8,000 people. And there's this crazy strong wind, it's like a hurricane strength wind that comes down and pummels the island. And like all of the Adriatic Sea, the salt splashes on the pastures, and then these sheep eat the herbs that are these endemic herbs.
That's incredible.
Their milk really uniquely. So that's one component that makes it really special. And then, but I was also surprised as I was like coming back to this island, and I actually stayed there in the off season for like a month. And I was really surprised that there, even between factories, but also like the artisanal kind of, the unpasteurized versions, like the mom and pop versions of the cheesemakers, it was vastly different, made with really essentially the same milk. So it was just very interesting to me how the process of aging, the process of like the conditions under which the cheese is made, and then again that like alchemy of when it's made, even like a June cheese being different than a January cheese. And
wait, how is a June cheese different than a January cheese?
Yeah.
How does the weather impact cheese?
Different things. The temperature and the climate are different. The Buddha season is like, sometimes unpredictable, but it's, there's a lot of Buddha action during the winter usually. So it's really going to have like, like anything. It's like the seasonality of if we ate like
right. That's right.
Certain things, like it's going to fuel our body in different ways, right? And it's going to produce for the sheep a different milk.
That's incredible. That's just incredible. So much of this novel, this gorgeous, gorgeous novel, is about identity. Who we are as a person at home and in another country, and whom we belong to, whether it's a person in a marriage or a country. So I would like to know, while you were writing this book, did you have a sense of, well, I have Croatian roots, but I live in America? And did that change as you were writing this novel and as you were living through Marina?
Yeah.
As she returns to her country?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, the themes that definitely I'm obsessed with are identity, belonging, and home, which kind of run through the whole narrative. And I was really interested, being that my grandparents never returned to the country where they were born. I was very curious, as a person that has now been back to Croatia like more than 24 times, and learned some of the language. I speak it badly, but I can speak.
We want to hear it. Say I like cheese.
But I think the idea was like, there have been a lot of stories about assimilation coming to America, like,
right,
trying to integrate into America. But I was like, well, what about a reverse assimilation narrative where someone goes back to a place that was once home and they've changed and it's changed? And I think that's like kind of a universal element, because in a way, a lot of people can relate to that, even if it's in the US. Like
That's right.
Like some people going back, like I was born in the Twin Cities in Minnesota. And like, if I went back, there would be like kind of, I live in New York City. Like it's a very different culture going back to the Midwest, or like I lived on the West Coast. Like, I lived in Los Angeles for a couple of years. If I was to kind of like go back, that's like former selves of mine that are there in a way. And so Marina's confronting her former self going back home to this island, and is sort of, like you said, in this, fracturing marriage and dealing with a whole lot of facing her past. So
yeah. I also wanted to ask you, I always want to know, do you feel like in writing this novel that you were forced to learn techniques that you didn't have before, and maybe the techniques that you'll use in your next novel? I always hope the answer is yes, and it never is to me.
Well, we sort of touched on this a little bit, and I think it's something where it's like, and you've written 13, so I really feel like you should be answering this versus me. But my take is kind of like, I learned a lot about at least how I wrote that novel. I would say, like, there's always, Jean Kwok talks about the pantsing versus the plotting.
Right.
She's a master at structure. So I'm kind of like, I think I work very well with a looser structure, in the sense that, like, if I have sort of handles of where I'm going, and place was a big handle for me with the setting and how it influenced the people, and obviously the division, which I exacerbate in the novel. I feel like if I have some sort of semblance of like where I'm going, then that's where the surprises come in, and the sort of things that are unexpected. If I have some kind of a little bit of a roadmap, I think that's how I work best. But then next novel, I'll be like, I totally pantsed it, but who knows? I think I will take that with me, though, in terms of just sort of having an idea of, certain kind of points that I want to hit, not in like necessarily a highly structured way, but just in terms of, how I want to implement the themes.
When do you know, for you personally, when it's time to stop researching? Because as you probably know, and all writers out there know, you can research for years, and sometimes it becomes a detriment to actually writing your book.
Yes.
So when did you know when to stop?
So I think, like, it's interesting when the magic comes out of the writing. For me, like, it, and some of these descriptions, like, there are fictional cheeses in the book. Like I said, I exacerbate. I mean, it's a real place, the island, but it's also like my version of the island. It's not like, not everything is accurate, which was actually very freeing as someone who did journalism and had to do fact checking and stuff for that, to be able to be like, it doesn't matter. It's true to the essence of the story that I'm trying to tell. So I think, being able to be more free in those descriptions for me was like, actually just having the research handy in my mind, but not being so much like, it was using a different part of my brain than when I write journalism or something.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's true. It does use a different part, because a lot of these things are, you're not looking for the facts, you're looking for the stories and how to build your story. Talking more about surprising things, there was a lot of surprising things in this book. I didn't realize that there were rival cheesemakers, which is very different than thinking about rival. We're not talking about like Kraft versus whatever big cheese company. We're talking about, like small batch cheeses and people making them who really deeply care about the quality of their product. Yeah. Did you experience any of that rivalry when you went back there? Or
I think anywhere that has like a small town feel has these kind of, whether it's social rivalries, like I feel like it's sort of like small towns transplanted everywhere. And I think that's true on islands, or I think it's true in like suburbs sometimes, where there's like these kind of like, well, this person is doing, and like maybe it would be a rival butcher. I don't know. But for me, like the idea that, there was a long-standing. There was also I'm blanking on the name of it. Michael Paterniti wrote a book about rival cheesemakers in Spain, and it's nonfiction. And I remember when he came out with that, I was like, oh, everyone's going to think I copied his idea.
Oh, no.
So I think rivalries make for good stories.
Yeah.
Nonfiction, and I think that there is like definitely, I think that there's friendly competition, but I think people also definitely know that like people outside of the island just see Pog cheese as like Pog cheese. It's like,
oh yes. Oh, I have to tell this story that you've heard like 18 times.
Yes.
So you can just sort of like hum and pretend you didn't hear it.
I love this story. It's great.
So after I read Kristin's manuscript of this book, I loved it just so much. And she bought me a present, which was a wheel of Pog cheese the size of Jupiter. I mean, it was really this big thing. And I was so excited because this is very special cheese. But when we tried to cut it, it nearly broke the knife. So I called this, artisanal cheese store in Hoboken and said, I can't slice this cheese. Can you tell me how to do it? And the guy was kind of bored and busy, and he said, well, what kind of cheese is it? And as soon as I said Pog cheese, there was silence. And I heard him talking. He was telling everybody, it's Pog cheese. And I could hear all this excitement. He said, you bring that cheese down here and we'll take care of it for you. So I brought the cheese down. I carted down this big, huge thing. And as soon as I got there, all these people were waiting, and they were looking like I was carrying the whole diamond. They were so excited, and they took it to a back room, and they took some kind of wire to cut it with the wire. And as they were cutting it, I said, cut a piece for yourself. And they were stunned. They said, really? You're going to give us some of this cheese? And I said, yeah. And the thing is, that was the most delicious cheese I have ever eaten in my life. It's any of you out there, if you ever get a chance, Pog, P-A-G, cheese.
Yeah.
You have to try it. You can't
get it. I just wrote an article for Footers. It's like, you can't get it. It's like you're eating cheese from the wrong European country. They titled it, but it's absolutely sold out in the US. It's like,
yeah, it's incredible. Everybody there was just like, it's incredible. I also
go to Croatia. You can do that.
I also wanted to ask you about something else we talked about, which was the skinniness of the sheep.
Oh, yes.
We always think of big, fat, woolly sheep. And I remember in reading The Cheesemaker's Daughter, there were arguments about who had this special kind of milk that the sheep would drink and would be in the cheese. You said that these sheep that make this delicious cheese really aren't that hefty, right?
They're not. No, they're not like Australian sheep or New Zealand, what you might think of like the big woolly, like, they're an endemic breed called Pramenka, and they are like, their milk yield is a lot lower. So this is also why like it's very special, because they hand milk the sheep on the island.
Wow.
And so it's literally like, and you need a lot of milk. Like, I don't remember the proportions, but to make cheese, you need a lot of milk, so it's really like, and there's only a 6-month season. So these sheep, and also they're sort of grazing on sparse, herbs, because this island's very rocky. It's a karst terrain. So it's, all of these things make it kind of like very, very special. So yeah.
It is. It's incredible. It's just incredible cheese. You also were talking about, you actually wrote an essay about it, and everybody should go to Kristin's website and read her essays, which are fascinating. There was one about fortune telling by cheese.
Oh, yeah.
And I would love to hear you talk about.
Oh my God. So one of my travel writing colleagues, she was like, I'm in a group, and she said that she was doing tyromancy, which is fortune telling with cheese, which actually goes back to like the 2nd century in the writings of Artemidorus of Daldis, I think. Don't quote me on that. It's in the article. You can look it up on afar. But it's yeah, I was like, oh wow, we have to collaborate about something because this is amazing. And I have a book called The Cheesemaker's Daughter, and I've never heard of this tyromancy, and it was fascinating. You can read all about the reading I got on afar. It was so fascinating. Like, I'll just, like, a little spoiler was, like, there was an image in the rind where when you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. It was like, of course it's there. And then I asked other people, I took a photo and went around and I was like, what do you see? And they saw the same thing. So it was like,
wow.
It was like, and what was crazier is it was a cheese that's made by a factory on Pog, but it's not Pog cheese. It's called Dalmatinots, but you can get it in Chicago. I think the store was a beautiful rind. And so that's where she got it, because she's based in Chicago, and we did it via Zoom. So she actually had that piece of cheese, which was crazy. So,
wow. Yeah. You actually have some questions, so let's get to them. Kim Rudder, really nice photo of a dog. Kim, what's your favorite part of your writing process?
Yeah, I love doing research that, for this especially, it was hands-on. But I think there's always like that world building aspect for me. And I think place will continue to be something I'm not planning on setting another book on a Croatian island, but who knows?
You never know.
Probably not. But I do think I'm really influenced by place and setting and it becoming a character. So I think, like, for the writing process, I love when I can get like a description just rings right for me, or a line of dialogue just rings right. And I'm like, yes, that is totally what that character would say. And sort of when I'm surprised by what characters say, because there's a grandmother in the book, Grandma Badarina, who's kind of sassy, and it was fun to hear what she had to say on the page. So that was really exciting. We love Grandma Badarina. She wasn't like my grandparents or anything. It was like just this character that had lots to say on the page. So,
do you miss your characters? Do you still hear them in talking to you?
I do sometimes. I feel like especially Grandma Badarina, I miss a lot. But I think I miss being in that world with them sometimes. But I've gotten to dip back into it, like with reading parts of the book, and I'm actually going to the island at the end of this month to promote the book, which I'm really excited. Yeah.
Oh, take a lot of pictures.
I know.
Photos. Unbelievable. You have another question too from Kim again. What was one of the artisanal cheese profiles that surprised you the most?
Well, so by profiles, I guess you're meaning the type of cheese, but I really, for this novel, focused on Pog cheese. And I think what sort of surprised me the most, going back to sort of the factory produced cheese, which has, I would say, like a generally more controlled environment versus like the artisanal producers, who are the smaller producers. But then there's like also medium-sized producers that kind of have some mechanized aspects, like they're not doing everything by hand. Like the super small producers are essentially doing unpasteurized milk and essentially everything by hand. But then there are like the medium ones and I think there's, it's just interesting to me how aging and like process, it just can taste like such a different cheese. So, I mean, that's just mind blowing to me if you like go and do Pog cheese sampling around the island.
So this is probably an ignorant question, because I really don't know. When they're aging the cheese, what does that look like? Is it like, does it have a form and it's just in a barrel, or where is it?
I am going to try and see if I can find a photo on this one. So it's literally like there are just, some of them age on plastic, some of them age on wooden planks, and it's like a cheese. So the character calls it her cheese castle because she grew up in going to the cheese factory. So it's like you think about a child's perspective going into like this aging room that's like part of a factory, and you have just wheels of cheese that are stacked on these planks, and you're just looking up, and I mean it's just rows and rows of cheeses that are aging, which is wild.
And how do you know when they're ready? Is there like a set time?
That's a good process, and probably a question something you'd have to ask the cheesemakers about the process. But I mean, one of the things of like when it's ready is now it has its PDO status, so protected designation of origin. That's a minimum of 60 days aging.
Okay.
That's for a young pog cheese, but it can age like up to at least a year. But all of the texture and flavor changes throughout that aging process. So like, mature old pashki sear is like very different than like a young pashki sear. Like that alone would taste like very different with the same wheel that's being rubbed with oil and flipped, and Yeah.
Robin made a really interesting comment about the wonderful smell in that aging room.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, would you have in the aging room, would you have different kinds of cheeses, or would it have to be all the same? Because you might not want the scent of one cheese to
It's a good
impact
question.
another one.
Yeah. And that's another part of, I would say, the alchemy. That's like, yeah, you do have multiple cheeses. Generally, like you have rows of pog cheese, but then they make other types of cheeses. So those are in the same aging room. And depending on sort of what's being made when, like, there's definitely overlap. They're not, they're neighbors. They're next to each other.
So I know everybody wants to know, what's your writing life like? And do you always have like a plate of cheese as a snack by your desk?
I wish I always had a plate of cheese. I did an interview with Hannah Howard for the Cheese Professor, and she's like, "What's in your fridge right now?" And I'm like, "Well, I try to." There's definitely like the Horizon Organic singles, because I have a 6-year-old daughter who likes those, and then, I love a good triple cream, like a Latour. I love a bijou from Vermont Creamery. I love a good manchego, because now I can't get pog cheese. So, it's a good sheep's milk cheese, or like Murray's is amazing. And they deliver everywhere. Like we had that in Hoboken. And
yeah, I'm still eating it. That cheese is so delicious. Oh my God.
So good. It's, there was a sheep's milk cheese. I think you probably maybe had it there from the Pyrenees. So you can get like all these amazing cheeses that I feel like really kind of like bring you to that place. And I hope the novel also brings you to that place.
Oh, yeah.
That like just the sensory descriptions, but also, I don't know, the AP review said it would make you hungry, I think.
It does make you hungry. I mean, you want like a plate of cheese and a glass of wine.
Yeah.
To go along with it. It's completely delicious. So when you're writing during the day, do you have a page count, an hour count?
Yeah. So when I was doing like, I would say when I had a version of that roadmap, my goal was like 1,000 words a day. And, there would be days when I did not make that. This was, during the pandemic largely. And, I would like go off to have my time by myself in, in close confined quarters where we all were like not leaving. And that was my escape. So I was like, it's 1,000 words. That's my goal. And, and sometimes I'd fall short, but that was really the goal. In terms of like, I've had more articles recently. So I will set, like for me, word count goals. Sometimes I'll set time goals. But I like the idea of like, I hit the word count. It's like, it's exciting. And then I feel like, oh, I've got this many more words. And sometimes with assignments, unlike novels or longer, you have like, this article is 600 words. This article is 1,200 words. And then you're like,
right. You have a word constraint. So
I like hitting those things. I think that's from my journalism background of like, I'll hit this word count. When I'm actively doing it.
So how is, of all you're a travel writer, how is travel writing and novel writing, how do they mesh? Is there any place where they mesh? Like when you're travel writing, do you have to be careful not to start formulating stories about the characters you meet?
I think, I'm always inspired. I love my favorite kind of research is just talking to people, because I think over like 20 plus years of going to Croatia, there have been so many stories that have influenced this story, like indirectly as well. Like it may not be like there's no one person that a character is based off of, but it's something where it's like stories that I've heard. I did a lot of like after the war, interviewing people from all walks of life. Like I was initially thinking I was going to do some film, but I was a student. So I like literally captured people's stories on film. So all those stories kind of like fed into my psyche. And I think we're always just in the back of my head waiting to kind of come out in ways, and I'm sure influenced, you know, some of the experiences definitely of like this character was a refugee. So during the war in the former Yugoslavia. So it's, I think that, you know, place is, as I said, I think a character in this book, and
story world,
and building a world with characters that feel real was something where it was freeing to let my imagination go. But like I said, I felt like I always had the handles of like knowing knowing the place and then being able to play with that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Can you talk at all about what you're working on now, or do you prefer not to? Or
oh my God, what I'm working on now. Sanity every day? No, I don't know. It's basically just a week after launch. So I feel like I'm kind of like, you know,
oh, right. That's right. This is you can't be writing at all now, probably.
I'm not really right. I'm like, and then I'm going to Croatia. So honestly, what I've been doing is like doing like related pieces. I haven't been doing like I have one coming out. Another one for Afar. I have like another one coming out in Electric Lit in September. So it's like,
that's great.
Yeah. So it's those kind of things that are sort of like the supplementary part. I wrote an email today to friends and family, and I was like, part of being an author is not just writing the book. It's all these other
That's
things.
right.
So it's
That's
all
right.
the other things that have been really consuming my time. But I hope in the fall to definitely delve into a project that I am excited about, that will explore a lot of the same themes, I would say, but not set in Croatia. And you know, but still a lot of what is home, like how our
identity. Yeah.
You know, identity is a big one because, you know, with how the borders have changed, and you know, how people have defined themselves with hyphenated identities and things that have become like prominent after the war that weren't so important or prominent before the war, I think is really interesting and will continue to fascinate me.
Oh, we have another question. Here we go. Do you have a notebook or something where you jot down ideas or dialogue as you travel and work on other projects?
Yes. So I definitely always have a notebook in my bag, especially when I travel. And I feel like, you know, travel generally, whenever I travel, like, you know, it heightens the senses, right? So you're constantly kind of like attuned in a different way than maybe your everyday life at home. And, you know, you'll often overhear interesting little things if you sit at a cafe, you know, things that you'll hear people passing by, things that you might observe in a different way, especially when it's like a different country and culture. But even if you're, you know, sometimes I'm like, New York you can travel in New York. I mean, you can take the subway,
right,
go into a completely different world.
That's right.
And so it doesn't have to be like a long journey, I think, to capture different, and the subway's another great place. Like, I love dropping on the subway and pretending I'm doing something, but I'm really taking notes on my phone.
I always eavesdrop. Eavesdrop, especially at restaurants. I always remember, what are they saying?
Yeah. But I think just getting into the habit of like that, you know, being an observer is really, it's useful, even if you're not going to use what you are.
It's absolutely useful. Yeah. Okay, so I have the question that I always ask. What's obsessing you now and why? Beside the book and cheese.
Oh my God. What's obsessing me now? I feel like I am really obsessed. I'm obsessed with going back to Croatia, and also
I bet you are.
I mean, personally, it's like our 15th wedding anniversary. So
congratulations.
Thanks. So we're going to go, to Paris stop over in Paris so I'm kind of obsessed about going back to Paris, which is going to be where I was like, I was in my second trimester of pregnancy. Yeah. So, and then now my daughter's turning 6. So, and I'm obsessed about her birthday, which is coming up. So.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's absolutely wonderful. Oh, this person is saying he misses you.
Oh.
So whatever. Okay. Well, I want to just remind everybody that I put up a bookshop.org link for all of you, which makes it really easy because bookshop.org will tell you the nearest indie bookstore. We always support that because it supports your community. This particular interview will live forever on our A Mighty Blaze YouTube station, so you can rewatch it. It'll most likely be a podcast also in the next few months. And thank you so much for all being here and for asking questions. Sometimes people aren't brave enough to do that. And I most want to thank Kristin. Look at this gorgeous book cover again. It's beautiful. It's just perfect.
Green in that, doesn't it? It's like,
yeah,
it's actually more teal, but for some reason on the screen it looks really electric green.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful book cover. And who can resist a sheep? So I will see all of you next week. Kristin, you hang on. You don't go anywhere. And I'll see all the rest of you next week. Thank you all. Bye.